What is up and welcome back, folks. My name is Justin Kana, bringing you another fantastic interview episode. My guest today is Alessandra Ciuffo. You might know her from content that spans back almost 10 or 12 years when she was a literal child competing on Food Network, and she made connections with big names in food media like Rachel Ray. And she's since grown that into going to culinary school, expanding her experience, getting professional training, growing to the time of this conversation. She was talking about like 120,000 followers, I think, on Instagram. Because this was an interview that was recorded similar to some of the other conversations that are just now getting published, just 468,000 followers on Instagram. We get into a whole bunch of insights in this conversation, whether you're interested in building an audience of your own, starting in food media, going to culinary school, documenting your journey. There's so many dot points that get covered here. If you want to do us a huge favor with the show and share it with a friend who might be interested in getting into this side of content creation, that would really, really mean a lot. But I'll get out of the way. Let's talk to Alessandra. I have a name that I want to bring up, and it's Rocco Sacramone. And I wanted to know who that is, why that's an important name for you. Can you tell us about who he is?
Absolutely. Rocco Sacramone is he's like my uncle, my culinary godfather, however you will call it. He is the most important mentor to me that I've had in the culinary space. It's kind of crazy thinking that, you know, throughout my entire culinary career, like he's been that person throughout all of it from like that professional perspective. And it's just like so crazy to see like how it's changed over time and how I've grown and how he's always been there. And he's so special. He's one of the most amazing chefs. I, to this day, will forever say that the best Italian restaurant in Queens for sure, I would argue to say New York as well, is at Trattoria L'Incontro, which is Chef Rocco Sacramone's restaurant.
And did you spend time there? Did you have family that got you, like, did you guys go out to eat there? What is your personal relationship or maybe even professional relationship there?
Sure. So he is a really good family friend of mine. So my uncle and him are best friends. My uncle's his doctor. And they have been with Rocco since he opened up a teeny tiny pizzeria in Manhattan. And it's so funny. I was talking to my dad about this the other day. And he was saying, you know, I remember when Rocco opened his pizzeria in like the 80s in New York. And I said, there's something special about this guy. It's a pizzeria, but he has 15 to 20 specials and it's just a pizzeria. And from then on, they knew that he was going to be uber successful. And when he opened the restaurant that's still there, his flagship in Astoria called Trattoria L'Incontro in 1999, my parents were there the day of the grand opening. My christening was there. My communion was there. My parents' 50th was there. He's always been like part of our family. Like I said, he feels like an uncle to me. But definitely when I started getting into the food industry, that is when it kind of pivoted to just being like that uncle to being my culinary godfather, if you will. And I'll never forget, I was prepping for Rachel versus Guy Kids Cook Off, the first show I did on Food Network. And I wanted to get, you know, different experiences. I'd been cooking in my kitchen, like making 10 recipes a day, craziness for an 11-year-old. But we were like, let's go to Chef Rocco's and get some, you know, new inspiration. So I'm cooking with him and I'll never forget, my mom is in the kitchen with me and Rocco and he's showing me different things. We're making these Asiago cheese bowls. You like grate the cheese in a pan, then dip it in ice water and then like put it over like a quart container. And we're making so many of them, like practicing them. And my mom's like, Rocco, like, stop, it's okay. Like, I don't want you to waste like ingredients. Like, it's so sweet that you're teaching her, but like, you don't have to do all this. He goes, my waste. We're going to use these tonight in the restaurant. Is so funny. It was so beautiful. And, you know, that just started that kind of new level of our relationship, which was on a little bit more of a professional setting, but still having that kind of like familial uncle feeling. And it just, you know, it went on to, I've made pasta a bunch of times with him and his mother when she used to make the lasagna, which was amazing. And definitely ever since I started taking it a step further and decided to go to culinary school, you know, during my entire time in culinary school, I was working more front of house because I originally thought that's where in a restaurant setting I would thrive more. Just I loved the food and all that, but I love talking about it and sharing that with people. And then as of recently, I've been back of house with him, doing a little bit of a stage in the kitchen, and that's also been so awesome, so incredible, and I'm loving every minute of it, and he's amazing. I could talk about him for days.
I guess we don't have to spend too much time on him, but I really want to dig into that relationship that you ultimately develop with a mentor figure in your career. And I know I would normally save this for later on in the interview, but I guess when you have a question or you're pondering something and you have someone like Chef Rocco in your life, I guess, are there frameworks or ways that you approach asking him for help?
I mean, it's so funny because I think I'm a very like thorough person. So sometimes like I'll be like, oh, I want to ask Rocco something, but like I feel bad. I don't want to bother him. He's busy. And like my mom, I guess because she knows him and she's friends with him as well, she's like, just call him. It's Rocco. It's fine. And so I'm always in my head about it, but then I literally just text him like, hey, Rock, can I call? He's like, sure, baby, right away. And I literally just call him and he picks up right away. It's the other day I was making this uovo raviolo, and my first time I was playing with it, pasta ingredients, this, that, whatever. And I like wanted to know how he makes this crema di parmigiano that he puts the sauce on there. So I'm like, oh, I feel bad bothering him. My mom's like, just call him. I call him on the phone. He loves it. He gives me like the whole explanation. And then I send him a video later on once I finish making it, like what it looks like. It came out great. And then he calls me back up and he's like, listen, it looks beautiful. It looks great. But just so you know, like you could do this, this, and that. And like, I think that like, to me, it's always so reassuring because I think, and this is a good lesson for anybody in any industry, but I think a lot of times we feel like we're bothering our mentors, but in the end of the day, I think there's a certain element that they really like and they enjoy feeling that they are useful to somebody and giving them that piece of the puzzle that they don't have already. And it's really rewarding. And it's funny because not to bring it off the topic, but like my dad has recently, he's in a different profession. He's in the medical field, but he started working with interns recently. And I was telling him about my experience with Rocco, and I was like, it's so awesome. Like, I feel so grateful that he's like spending all this time to show me different techniques and, you know, do this and that. And he was like, you know, I'm around the same age as Rocco, and I understand where he's coming from, why he's doing it. There's something special about being able to transfer that information and knowledge to someone else who's so eager and excited to learn about it, almost in his way of having your legacy live on and have them even surpass it maybe as time goes on.
I so well said, and thank you for sharing that. And the reason I bring it up is because I think that is such a common problem, right? It's like you enter this industry and you're craving knowledge so badly, and you just want someone to like take a chance on you and like be that person in your corner who would help you in the event that something were to happen. And people get these mentor relationships, and then the time comes where they're at a crossroads, or they need to make an important decision, or they just feel stuck or burnt out or whatever, and they just won't use it. It's almost like you have this thing in the garage and you just won't drive it. You know, I just think it's so funny how that sometimes happens, and that comes from different places, from different people, but I just think it's interesting, and so thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. And 9 times out of 10, it's like people are always willing to help you, and it's just like a matter of asking. It's like the common phrase, if you never ask, the answer is going to be no, so you might as well just like ask. I think it's something along the lines of that. It's like it's a win-win situation. You either ask and it doesn't work, or you ask and something happens.
100%. There's another name that I want to bring up before we get into kind of the meat of things, and I think it's more fun to get a sense of your background this way. Die-hard listeners of this show will know this. It's not really something I really kind of tout, but my first knife set was this like bright orange Santoku and paring knife set from Rachel Ray, and my mom bought it for me when I was just in high school and I was getting into food. What can you tell us about Rachel Ray?
Rachel Ray is so amazing. I was just having a conversation about her yesterday. She is such a badass in the culinary industry. I mean, talk about someone who literally started in supermarkets giving food demos to becoming one of the biggest names in the food industry, never having been, you know, professionally trained, but still being so iconic that, you know, pretty much anywhere in the world you say her name and people are going to know who you're talking about. She is a hustler. She's so kind. She gives back to the community, such a philanthropist. And she just genuinely, you know, going back to that, like, idea of having a mentor, like, she wants to help people, wants to see them succeed. She has a warm heart, but she's also very, like, determined, passionate, and motivated. Yeah, she's a rock star.
And what was working with her like? And I know that that's not like you were her exclusive prodigy and you were the, you know, like she was the only one who ever trained you. But I guess if someone gets the chance to work with someone that is as high profile as that, do you have any kind of like, oh, well, I wish I would have done this when I was, you know, close with Rachel, or I'm really glad that I got the chance to do this while I had that time?
I think the most important thing is just like asking questions and like having that curiosity and like making the most of the time that you do have with them. Rachel, it's funny because I've known her for almost over 10 years now, like just like the lifespan of like my time in this food media industry. And, it's crazy because I've actually like seen her and interacted with her like over 10 times, but most times it's like in short bits just by the nature of someone as high profile as Rachel Ray. But I will say, it's like she has the ability to make you feel special every time you talk to her. And every time I'm with her, I try to like exchange some sort of like, important nugget of information. And I think that like that's just like what stays with me. And it's like till the next time I see her, it's just reminded of it again. And I think that like just really being curious, open-minded, but also trying not to talk as much as you listen, which I've learned as someone who is Italian and loves to talk a lot, especially with someone that's like has a lot of knowledge. You kind of want to like pull the brakes a little bit and let them, share that information with you.
I want to get into your culinary school content, but correct me if I'm wrong here. Going to culinary school was not your first time in college. Can you talk a little bit about what happened in business school for you?
Yeah, sure. So it's actually funny. And another thing, I was talking about this with someone lately because, some people have this like epiphany after, they went to college or started another career, like, oh, like I wanted to go into culinary, I'm going to culinary. That really wasn't the case for me. I mean, I've known all along that I wanted to go into the culinary field. So when I was graduating high school, a lot of people came up to me and were like, are you going to culinary school? Like, it just kind of makes sense, like based on your like history and like the trajectory you want to be on. And I wasn't sure, at that time I guess I didn't really fully exhaust my options. But at that point in my life, I was very focused on my academics. I was taking AP classes, just really driven towards that. I had this idea of going to college. And as much as I love food, I knew that that was something that I wanted to do like after getting that like solid foundation of business school. And I think for me and like where I am now with like what my future goals are, I think that like made sense and I don't have any regrets. So I did end up going to Fordham University. I was a business administration major with a focus on marketing and just kind of getting like a really good background and overview in all things business. And during the time, I was still cooking. Obviously, COVID happened in the center of my college experience. So in a way that worked for me. I mean, obviously there were lots of pros and cons with COVID, but for me, it pushed me back home. I was spending more time in the kitchen, really starting to pick up and create this like food media brand, I guess you could call it, that I have now, Flavors by Ale. And so that was like the kickstart of it. But yeah, for me, I guess it was never really like, I knew that culinary school would probably come later, but I know that college was like something that I was going to do first, and I'm really glad that I did.
The reason I bring that up is because I think I get the DMs, you probably get the DMs too, of people who are saying, hey, I'm an accountant, and all I do on my weekends is smoke meat, and I like to host parties, and I watch Food Network, and I binge all the podcasts, and I feel like I'm living a double life, basically, where I have this thing that I love, but I think there's something, whether it's financially related or work hours related or, just anything that I think deters people from coming into food. But it does have this draw, this gravity that pulls people into it. I guess, do you have any advice to someone who is maybe in that space right now? Let's just use the direct example. They are in business school right now, and they're listening to this, and they're saying, there's nothing more in the world that I love than food. I guess, is it patience? Is it just you need to explore more options? What advice do you have for that person?
Absolutely. And I do get questions about this all the time, whether it's in the culinary field or anything, because I've always been someone who loves to, be a mentor, even in my college. And my biggest advice is to always look at your circumstance and like where you are right now and not look at it as a negative. You are always pulling something away from the situation that you are in right now, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. This goes for whether you're stashing in a restaurant or you're doing an internship in finance. You go, you do this job, you learn things that you liked about it, things that you don't like, ways that you want to grow and improve from this, things that you never want to do again. And I think that having that mindset going into it is the most important thing, because then you won't feel like you're wasting your time, you're in the wrong career path. You just see it as it's part of the process. So I would say, open up, like, here are your other options. If you're a weekend warrior in the kitchen, like, go for it. Continue maybe like expanding on it a little bit more, and like keep investing in that side hustle until, one day you're like, okay, maybe this doesn't have to be the side hustle anymore. I can, pour all my focus in this and make that my full-time gig. But I think that like not seeing it as like a big switch and finding a way to integrate it and like find positives out of everything that you're doing and see it all as like pulling all these like important nuggets and lessons of information. I think that's the best way to kind of look at it while you're in this transition.
Have you always been like a pretty optimistic, positive person, or did you like pick that up from somewhere? Like, and I'm the same way. I think that's why I struggled in a lot of professional kitchens, because they can be kind of like, just keep your head down, and it's gonna be shitty tonight. Like, I hope you guys are ready. Like, and I don't know. I've always just been a little bit more positive than that. Have you always been like that?
I think so. It's funny because if you ask my mom, like when it's just the two of us, we're like screaming at each other, and I'm like, we want to rip our heads off, and we're just, I think, a very passionate family, because then 2 seconds later we're hugging, laughing, whatever. But my dad, I think, is a really big part of like getting that perspective. My dad's like favorite quote is always, "Life is beautiful." Like, I remember from a really young age, my famous saying I would tell my mom when she was like crying about something. I'm like, "Listen, Mom, build a bridge, walk over it, knock the bridge over. There's nothing you can do. You just got to keep moving ahead." And I was saying that when I was like 7 years old. So I really do think I've always had this perspective. Like I said, my dad was a big role in that. He's always been the type of person, his catchphrase is, "Life is beautiful, like, do what you love." I think it comes from the nature of what he does, working as a physician in a hospital. He's seeing life or death. So when we're crying about like something so minuscule, like something overcooked, over seasoned, or as silly as like breaking a dish or something like that, it's just, there's more to life, like, which obviously everyone gets caught up in the moment and they get upset over little things, but I think you just sometimes have to zoom out and see the bigger picture, and life's too short.
Well said. Do you ever think about, or I guess, did you ever struggle thinking about turning your food love into your career? Because I think that that's another thing that the weekend warrior, as you mentioned, the person who just loves hosting dinner parties for 8 of their friends at their house, and they get that advice from people. You should be a chef. You should open a restaurant. There's this great Twitter thread I shared the other day from this guy who was getting that advice. He made it his career, and he realized that there was a lot of aspects of really, truly being in food that he really just didn't like. And so what I tell people is like, you should do these like micro experiments. That's why I'm such a big fan of like going and staging, or like going and traveling and eating a bunch of food in Spain, for example, because it's like, you can scratch that itch. I don't necessarily think that it is right for everybody to have food be their main thing that is like taking care of their family and it's providing them professional fulfillment. I guess, do you think about that at all? Did you grapple with any of that at all as you were thinking about making the switch from business going into food?
I think so. I think, it's funny. I'm just thinking about this in my head, but I feel like we live in the age of the unicorn. I'm going to use that as an example to kind of like, given, like, it's just, we live in a world where jobs that didn't exist, at first I was going to say 10 years, but literally a year ago, didn't exist, are now existing. Totally. People are making careers out of things that you would have never guessed. So I totally see that. And I think that, like, obviously there's things that people don't love about like the industry, and they don't want to have to do all of that. But I think that we also live in this unicorn age where if you want to drop the things you don't like and hone in on what you do like, there's a space for that. There's an area where you can make a full-time career, or like dive into your passion that way. And, or even like if there's not something, you can create it. I think that like finding a place of uncharted territories, like that's the sweet spot nowadays. People are always, looking to grow and find that like untapped market. And I think that in the past, that was seen as like, okay, you don't have like all the parts of the puzzle, like you're never going to make it, you're never going to amount to something. Whereas nowadays, being unique and not having that part of the puzzle, but replacing it with something that's special to you, that's kind of like the secret sauce to success now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's true. So I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think that everybody has to make food their full-time hustle if they don't want to. And I think, in a way, there's also a beauty of keeping your passion as something that's kind of like a respite from everything else going on in the world, which, I mean, maybe we can talk about later because I could go on a whole thing about this. But I think there definitely for me, and I've spoke about this with other people, there's been a little bit of a switch for me now that I'm doing food media full time. I have this pressure of like needing to record every time I cook or do something. And in a way, I've lost a little bit of that beauty of just no phone, no computer, just here's my ingredients. I'm just cooking for me, not taking a picture about it after, not explaining it, and just enjoying it. And it's funny, I was talking about this with another social media content creator in the food space. We're like, but it's always in that moment that you wanted to record it because it was so good and everyone would love it. But, I've gotten better with that. I'm like, no, this one's for me. I'm like, if it's so good, I can recreate it and do it again for the camera. But sometimes you need that like separation because then, you don't want to, burn the fuel. You don't want to burn out, and you want to still keep in tune with your passion.
Well, that allows you to keep playing, right? Like, if you lose the juice, the mojo to continue putting stuff out and cooking, it's like then a lot of stuff starts to fall by the wayside, and that's the other double-sided, the other side of this coin. I saw this funny thing the other day, which was it was a pyramid, and then there was a dot on the top of the pyramid, and that's the CEO. And then there was another pyramid, which was an upside-down pyramid, and there was a dot on the bottom, and that's the creator. And this is a Colin and Samir thing. If you don't follow them, they're great in the creator economy space. And the gist of it was if you kind of pull the top dot on the pyramid away of the CEO dot, the pyramid's still intact. But in the reverse, it's like you pull the creator out, and it's like everything comes crashing down. And I think that's so interesting as like, especially in food media, when it's like, if you don't make a video, it's like things aren't getting monetized. The brands are pissed off. It's like there's nothing to comment or like on. And so I don't know. How do you think about that? I wasn't intending on switching into food media so quickly, but let's just take a quick side quest over there. How do you think about that?
No, I mean, I totally get that. I feel like it's been such an interesting period right now for me because, I had my food media brands, pages a little bit before starting culinary school, but obviously for me being in culinary school is what like bolstered my media pages and had me like grow crazy numbers overnight. And so now that I've finished school and I'm not having those like those exact style videos because I'm just not I'm not in culinary school anymore, and B, losing a little bit of that schedule. I was going to school 5 days a week. If I fell behind a video, I just would have kept like messing myself off. So I was very like consistent in getting that on, which I think was a huge part of my success. But now I'm out of school, I'm doing an externship, I'm trying to do this full media full time, which seems like it would be easier because I'd have more time. But the difference is I now have to create the content, and that's a lot harder than just showing up and recording what you're doing. You have to now set it up and whatnot. But it's been that transition period where now I'm like, I'm losing followers, I'm gaining followers, and it could really get in your head. You have this pressure. You're like, I need to be posting every day, like, but do I want to post if it's not my top quality? Would I rather post less and it be of a better quality? So it's like all these different pressures and anxieties that like kind of like rest on your shoulders. So I could totally agree with that like pyramid situation. I never thought of that, but it's very true. And I think for me, and we spoke about this earlier about being a little bit more positive, that's something that's really helped me get through it. I think I like sometimes have to like bring myself down and say, you know what, like, you need to obviously put yourself first sometimes because it doesn't always happen, but enjoy the moment. Like sometimes I'm out with my family and friends and we're cooking something and I'm like going crazy trying to record it, and everyone around me is like, just relax, enjoy, like, life's too short. Sometimes you got to put the phone down and smell the roses. So I've tried to find that balance, but the pressure is totally real about like feeling like you have to constantly perform and put things out and show every side of you and be vulnerable, but be tough and be consistent and do this and do that. But I think, you have to remember you're human and that sometimes it's okay to take a break, and that break will actually, reinvigorize and like recharge you to come back even stronger than you were before.
All right, let's talk about culinary school for a hot second here. I think this is a horrible question, horribly phrased. What are you expecting from the answer? But in speaking to you, I know the internet is going to want to see the question, so I'm going to unfortunately ask it, and then I promise it's going to get more interesting. Alessandra, is culinary school worth it?
I think it is a personal question. I I'm ready to take this question. I don't even care that you asked it. I think it's a great question. I think it's a valid question. I think that everybody's at a different place. Everyone has different goals. You know, for me personally, culinary school was worth it. I call it my master's in food. I was talking about how I went to business school first. I did that for 4 years. I started working, wasn't loving it. Knew I wanted to be in the food industry, didn't know which angle to go into, but figured why not get a good base? And for me, 6 months, 5 days a week, I went in, and over the course of 6 months, I learned everything soup to nuts, from how to hold a knife to how to sous vide and ferment and, you know, all that gitchy, cool, really cool, unique stuff in the kitchen. And so for me, there's no other way that in 6 months' time I would have been able to do that or kind of map out better what I wanted to do in this industry. But on the other hand, is it necessary? Absolutely not. I do not think it is necessary or the right path for everybody. The other day I was having a conversation with somebody on my Instagram DMs who was asking me if she should go to culinary school. Right now she's currently a line chef, and she's like literally in high school, a line chef at a Michelin star restaurant. She was like, I don't know what to do. Should I go to culinary school? Should I move up to a better restaurant? I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. Don't go to culinary school. You're in a great spot. Move to a higher restaurant. Keep working there. You're going to learn what you need on the job and like keep making connections. You already have your foot in a door, which I think for other people who are maybe like still interested in moving up the ranks of a restaurant and like doing culinary school for that reason, I get that. And it's a valid point because obviously going to a school, you open up that alumni network and have connections. But if your foot's already in the door, why go back and then, you know, and get all of this debt that now you didn't have? So it's a tricky question, but I think you have to ask yourself questions and try to really think about what you want to do and what your goals are and just take it from there. But the short of it is it's not necessary for everybody.
I'm personally really upset that I don't really have that much content from when I was in culinary school. I graduated CIA when I was in 2012, and so I started in 2010. And this was back when like mobile phones really didn't have great video capabilities. We would take some photos. I definitely have some photos from me in culinary school, but you have so much video content. I guess, can you talk about, was it always the plan to document your time in culinary school? Was there a specific moment when you were like, oh, somebody else is doing this and I could do the same for where I'm at? What was the genesis of you deciding to put content out there of your experience?
Yeah, totally. So I would say it kind of came after. So it's not like I was like, oh, I want to do this content, I'm going to go to culinary school. I was like, I want to go to culinary school. I wasn't happy with where I was working after school. Decided I'm going to go to culinary school. Now I'm like, you know, all these friends and families of mine, I'm telling them I'm going to culinary school. They're like, oh my God, that's so cool. I don't know anyone that went to culinary school. Like, what do they do? And this was around the time that I don't know if you are familiar with like Meredith Hayden, Wishbone Kitchen. She's a creator on TikTok that like blew up for this day in the life of a private chef in the Hamptons.
Oh, got it. Yes. I have seen her stuff.
I feel like it's kind of gotten to every corner of the internet, but that kind of style of a video where I'm taking you through my day, and I'd seen obviously other day in the lives, but I think that, you know, she really blew off because I think that was something interesting. People are like, what does a private chef in the Hamptons day look like? You know, what are the things they're doing? What are the unique challenges or tactics? And to me, like, that was a really interesting video style that I hadn't previously done before. So going into it, my friends and family were like, we're interested. I'm like, who knows? Maybe other people would be interested. So in my head, before starting school, I remember the night before, first of all, I thought I was like creating this division of like videos on the internet. Literally the night before I start school, I'm like scrolling on TikTok. I'm like, oh my God, there's another day in the life video. I'm like, okay, great. And they're doing it every day. And I'm like, shit, in my head, I was going to do this like once or twice a week. But now I'm like, people are doing it every day. I'm like, let's see how it goes. Let's get started. So I go in the first day, obviously timid. So I'm like trying to record, but like and it's always been a priority to me, like throughout the entire time that I was in school, to not make it distracting, not make it about, you know, recording, like being very low-key. It's funny. People ask like, how did you record this? I'm like, I literally prop my phone against like my waste bucket and like just forget it and just like sort through hours of content later. Like, it's not like I'm really on my phone, but anyway, I do it the first day, the second day, all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of interest here. It's blowing up. My Instagram reel that went from having like 5,000 views are now getting over 100,000 views. I'm like, there's something going on here. And then by the second week of doing it, now I'm getting a flood of questions from people. Oh my gosh, I have wanted to go to culinary school for so long, have been nervous, didn't know what it was like. Now you're inspiring me to look back into it. Jump forward 3 months into it, people are now enrolling in culinary school. People are coming up to me at ICE on their first day. Oh my God, you're Alessandra. I watched your videos. You're the reason I'm here. Administrators from the school are telling us we go do like open houses or open up a table at schools, and kids are coming up to us like, oh my God, you're the school that Flavors by Ale goes to. So crazy, like 360 from like where I started. And I just think for me, I started it to, do it for my friends and family. And then it really, and like maybe, I guess part of me was like, oh, who knows what this will do on social media. But since then, it's totally changed meanings for me. It really became about, I'm educating people. I feel like this is beyond me. It's really helping others discover their own passion. And my kind of like way of thinking about it was, of course, for me personally, this is revolving around culinary, but I think this idea of seeing somebody go after something that they've wanted to do and are so passionate about, and that's something that a lot of people see from my videos, is that passion that it's undeniable, and it's just very present in my videos. And I hope, and I've heard that it inspires people in culinary and beyond, in other, pockets of the world. But I think to me, that was what was the motivator to keep going and just kind of put gas in the engine. And every time I was tired and didn't feel like doing it, I'm like, you could do it, get it out there. And just seeing the feedback from people in the comments, like that's what fueled me and kept me going and was so motivating.
It's such a good story, such a good backstory. And kudos to you for just putting it out there. I think that's half of it, right? Like, it's so much of getting started is a problem for folks, and the other one is like putting it out there, actually like making the thing and putting it out there. So you did both, so well done. I think a couple questions on intimidation being in kitchens and filming. Are there specific questions, or just, hey, chef, heads up, I'm making this thing. How do you navigate filming in kitchens, making content for yourself? Because again, I will shout it from the rooftops that I wish I had more content when I was working in Michelin kitchens, when I was in culinary school, when I was doing some of my first like pop-up dinners, and I just don't have it because I was just like, well, it's going to come at the sacrifice of the food, or I would make these excuses, and I kick myself for not having that stuff. And so, do you have any questions that you would like to ask folks that you're working with when you want to make content, or is it just kind of like assumed Ollie's coming in, we got to be ready for the camera to come out?
Well, I think for me, I try to be, like I was saying, like I try to be very respectful of like, not getting like people in it that don't want to be in it. I think like when I was in culinary school, I, was really squaring in like my phone's in front of my station. It's not going to bother anybody. If I was ever recording a chef, giving a demonstration, we're lucky that they encouraged us as a form of like kind of keeping up and studying what you're doing. So I would say like, everyone was recording. Obviously, not everyone was making TikToks from it, everyone was, encouraged to kind of record and remember. But if I were to post it, I would just let the chef know. I'll never forget. It was like early on when I started doing the videos, my head chef instructor was working at a restaurant, and it was like a video that got like over a million views. And he comes up to me, and all of a sudden it's the end of class, and I hear my voice on a phone, and he's watching the video. And I was like, oh my gosh, like he's going to say something. And he goes, oh my gosh, last night one of my line chefs came up to me and said like, oh chef, like I saw you on TikTok. And he watched the video, and, from that point on, it was really funny because he kept like, then at that point he was getting more involved in the videos and wanted to help and like show, better aspects of it. But he was like, oh no, I love this. Me and my wife were like having like a great time, like watching the video. Again, you have to respect people's kind of like privacy if they want to be filmed or not be filmed. But I agree. I think that it's important to like not lose sight about what you're doing. And I will say, definitely, there were some times where like I had to put my phone down and I was trying to do something, and I've burned myself before trying to hold my phone while I'm flipping a steak, and now I have like oil splats over my hand. And sometimes it's just not worth it if you like are going to hurt yourself or you need to learn something. And I will say, moving into like, more of like a fast-paced environment like a professional kitchen or an event like a tasting menu, that's a little bit of a different story. It's harder to record during moments like that. So like what I've done, like during my time, like when I'm at L'Incontro, like I'll grab like, okay, we're doing something really cool. It's not a crazy period right now. Because people were like, I posted this video about like kind of like a day working in a kitchen. And they were like, how do you record this, that, whatever? I'm like, well, if you notice, it's not the regular style videos where it's propped in front of me and I'm doing stuff. I'm not recording while I'm on the line when orders are coming in when we're busy. I'm more recording if like I have a free second where I can just kind of like quickly showcase what we just did. Okay, put it back in my pocket. Let's go, like get back to work. And again, if I'm doing like, I've done sushi birthday parties and stuff like that, like it's my mom or someone else that's like kind of recording me in the act of doing it. So it is hard to kind of find that sweet spot of doing it. And I think that just like trial and error and, like I said, the most important thing is just being respectful of people and, how they feel comfortable being recorded or being out on the internet. Cause I know like a lot of people in my family are a little more private and they don't like to be in my videos and in my stories and whatnot. Whereas like I'm the opposite. I'm pretty much an open book.
I'm so curious when people talk about like, oh, well, I just posted it and it blew up. Or I just put it out there and all of a sudden I just had 100,000 followers. Are there additional tactics that you deployed, whether it was just like commenting on other people's comments or hashtagging properly? Or I think in addition to the thing that you already did really well, which was observing that like this style of video is already popular on the platform, are there any other things that you did to potentially contribute? And I'll tell a quick example if you need a second to think about stuff. I did this full breakdown of the show The Bear on Hulu, and I went and looked on subreddits to try to see if there was a bear subreddit. Funny enough, the Kitchen Confidential subreddit was linking to this little tiny subreddit, which was the hashtag r/thebear, and I posted my video there. And that was the kind of genesis to like giving the videos views on a bunch of different platforms. And so I guess, did you do anything like that strategically, tactically to kind of like blow up so quickly? Or was it just a case of like the algorithm gods blessed me and I was just able to see success quickly?
First of all, that's so cool. I love The Bear. I'm in the middle of binging the second season right now.
Nice.
And that's awesome that you found that pocket. But I would say it's a mix. Okay, so I've always tried to like, answering comments I think are like really good. You want to like engage with your community, trying to do some hashtags. But the hard truth of it is that I do think there is a little bit of this like magic unicorn. The algorithm decides to work for you one day. And for me, like, obviously I think that you have to have, quality content, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be using a professional camera, because as of now I just use my iPhone, but there has to be like a synergy of like the audio, the voiceover, the visual, like something's catching in that early beginning. But I think there is also an element of like luck and sometimes like hitting it at the right time or getting in the right place. And that's kind of like what happened to me to get started. But I will say like there's a difference between having like being a one-hit wonder or like keeping it going. And I think that like having that consistency and putting out content and answering your community and keeping them engaged and like, being an active part of that, I think is super important, at least for me and my channel and my growth and where I want my brands to go. But then on the other side, I've seen other creators who very minimal. They don't answer comments. They don't post stories. They just post their videos and millions of views every time. So I think it's a little bit of like a mysterious unknown that continues to hang over. Like, I've seen things, I've had conversations with like Meta, and they talk about, here are the things to help you do better with your reels. Add it in an Instagram app, like add this certain amount of hashtags, do this, post it this time, post 5 stories, 7 stories. To be honest with you, they can say these things and it's coming from the company themselves. But I don't know that there's like a, codified way to guarantee virality. Like, I just kind of think it's a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work. And also just like trial and error. It's like, okay, you find this style video, you find, this sub-thread on Reddit and it works, like, keep doing it. Like, see what happens. Like, okay, if this works, try something else and just keep going from there. But and the last thing I will say about it is that I think a lot of people sometimes like try to chase like that secret success, like that secret equation to make it perfect. Whereas if you kind of like forget all of that and just kind of really hone in on like what you want to create, what's genuine to you, what you're passionate about, not worry about the frills, sometimes that's the content that really ends up doing the best. And I think like for me, it's been funny because I took a break from doing kind of like some of my recipe videos from home. And it's like been weird for me to get back into that. And I'm like sitting here going crazy, moving my phone a million angles and doing this and doing that and the lights. And then I'm like, I've had so many videos, I've gone viral from like super minimal, like prop your phone in front of you. The lighting's not even great. It's not high quality, but it's real. And I think people sense that. They sense that passion. And I think that's also super important.
I ask that because I think that people look for that sometimes. And I think that's a little bit of a losing search. Because it's like, what are you going to find? You know what I mean? Like 9 times out of 10, it's an unsexy answer. Like your consistency when you were, especially in the culinary school content, was insane. It was incredible. Like the amount of like content that you were pushing out there and tweaking and documenting. And in addition to the culinary school workload, like you said, it's like 5 days a week. And like probably none of your other peers were doing that. So I think you should be rewarded for that hard work. And I'm just curious of making sure that we unpack the full story, because I think a lot of people will like to tout like, oh, it was so easy, I just did this. And it's not always the case. I was just curious if there was any, additional, little bonus things that stood out for you. But it sounds like you did it exactly right. Just do the boring work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. Everyone's gonna always like, oh, like, how did you do that? Like,
right.
I literally, someone came up to me and like, I asked me how many like Instagram followers I had, and like, I was like, oh yeah, I have like over 100,000, whatever. And they were like, oh my God, like, what did you do? How did you do that? And I was like, I don't know, people just like me. I'm like, they like me. They want to see my content. I'm like, I put a lot of hard work. And for me, like, it's funny because like my following did grow pretty rapidly. Like I would say, prior to starting culinary school, I had 3,000 followers on Instagram, mostly my friends and family that were following me from my main account, that I was like, here's a page about food. And it went from like that to now I have over 120,000 followers. And like, it was obviously a quick turnaround for like that many followers, but it's also something that I've wanted to do and invested time in way longer than that. And I had a TikTok page before any of this grew into anything. And I had the biggest following on TikTok, maybe like 30,000 followers before any of this, but it still wasn't at the level. And I dreamed of growing my Instagram and having this community. And I always would sit there watching these other influencers and saying like, oh, like, what can I do? What's that secret, like, rhythm, like that secret equation to getting to where I want to go? So I think it's always important to remember, like, you could see these people that made it to the top and may think like, oh, it's unfair, like how did they get there so fast, or like what are they doing that I'm not? But like everyone has their moment, and I think it's important to like realize that like sometimes what you see is not, it didn't just happen. There's a lot that goes into getting there.
I was watching one of your older TikToks in research for this conversation, and it was one of the culinary school ones, and you had talked about what the program was structured like, and you said something to the effect of, well, it's 6 months of classroom stuff and then a 2-month externship where you spend time at a restaurant, blah 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 blah. Like you said that in the TikTok. And this is not a gotcha moment. This is like, you, correct me if I'm wrong, are a food media extern at Delish Magazine now. Was there a moment where you said, maybe I don't have to do my externship at a restaurant? And what was that decision-making process like?
It's actually so funny because it kind of, I didn't go in with that. My plan was to do it in a restaurant. And then my advisor came to me with like, hey, we found this Food Network, food media, like, externship opportunity. They reached out to us, like, it's working for the Test Kitchen in New York. And I was like, I was not thinking about that, but like, that sounds pretty cool. I'm like, ooh, maybe I would be interested in doing that. Like, so something that I hadn't thought about, I was like, okay, let me apply. I applied for it. Now I'm not hearing back. Now all of a sudden I'm like, wait, I didn't even want to do this, but why do I care that I'm not hearing back or that it didn't move forward? So I was like, that's interesting. And then also at that time, I was applying to a bunch of different restaurants, like just trying to set up trails to see where I'd want to be. And like, I don't know if it was just like that time of year, but it wasn't just me. Like a bunch of my classmates were having a really hard time hearing back from chefs, just getting back from them. And, the end of culinary school was getting closer and closer and closer. And then some of my classmates overheard in the bathroom someone from a different class talking about how they landed an externship at Delish. So then I go back to my advisor and I'm like, girly, why didn't you tell me about this? I'm like, the Food Network people didn't get back to me. I wasn't even thinking about food media, but now it's on my mind. Like, I just want a trail. I would like to see what it's about, like where I want to go or what I want to do. And so I connected with them, went for a trail at Delish, ended up hearing back from some of those chefs. Unfortunately, it was kind of after I had already decided to go with Delish. But in the meantime, I'd done some other restaurant or catering trails just to see a little bit of different industries. And I was personally having like such a mental crisis over deciding where to do this externship. I don't know why. I think an element of also sharing my, full culinary experience on social media probably added to that. But I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I'm like, this decision is not just about simply me and what I want to do. It's what are people going to say? What are people going to think? Are they not going to take me seriously if I don't work in a kitchen? Like, does it like sound crazy if I don't do that? Or like, but also I'm like, in personal terms of like trying to sustain this business I've created like through social media, how am I going to do that if I'm working in a restaurant 5 days a week from literally 11 to 11 or 11 to 12? Like, no, I'm going to get burned out. I'm not going to want to continue making content. I'm not going to want to do it. So I had all of these different factors going into my head, and I was just really stressed about what to do. And it was like one person telling me like, do this, and then the opposite person telling me the other one. And it was like constantly back and forth, everyone giving me their opinion. But in the end, I just kind of like brought it into me, and my dad just like sat me down, and he's always been like a really big person of wisdom for me and just like giving me advice in like pivotal moments like this. And he's like, you have to remember that you're on your own journey. And this happened to me when I was graduating college too, being a business major. A lot of my friends were working in finance. Out of college, they signed 6-figure salaries. And I'm like, wait, should I be doing that? I'm like, I got the same degree as them. I can do that. Should I be doing that? But I didn't want to do it. My heart wasn't in it. So I would rather take less money and build up to maybe, making what they make or surpassing it in a slower, longer burning journey, but doing what I love. And I needed to remind myself of that when I was in culinary school. Yes, other people in my class might be going into the restaurant industries right now and doing that stage. But for me, I'm like, what is my goal? Where do I want to go? What are the skills that I want to get to help me get better and continue building the road that I'm on? I am only on it. This isn't a journey for everybody. As much as I share my life with other people and take them along on this journey, it's still my individual journey, and I'm the only one doing it. So I think that like keeping that in focus was super important for me. And now I feel really blessed because I found kind of like a synergy of all of this, because as I'm working in food media, I'm keeping up my social content. And then I have Chef Rocco, who is so amazing about just, letting me come in and stage and, work kind of like on a rotating basis that fits into both of our schedules. So I feel really blessed that it worked out for me. But I think that anyone in a similar situation, like, you just have to remember that in the end of the day, it's about you and your path and your journey. And as much as you don't want to let down or disappoint other people around you, you have to prioritize yourself.
I want to make sure we get you out of here on time. So I have one more big question, and then I want to do some rapid fire ones, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely. Please Don't even worry. I'm like, now I'm in it. I'm like, I could be late.
All right. Perfect. You and I, for at least seasons of our lives, maybe even still currently, were Food Network fanatics. For me, it was Emeril Lagasse and Alton Brown. I'm curious who it was for you. But how do you see the differences between, I'm going to call it traditional food media, magazines, maybe even blogs kind of like fall into that a little bit, and TV, combined or versus the kind of like new age of food media, which is like launching CPG products, having stuff on TikTok, community-based stuff, live streams where you can interact with the creator, courses that people want to sell, newsletters. What are the differences that you're noticing? And I guess, how are you navigating, okay, well, I am in this environment that is a little bit more traditional, but then me as a person in this more modern, I have this foot in this modern era. How are you grappling with that?
Absolutely. It's super important to talk about. I mean, it's crazy because I've wanted to do food media since I was a little girl and from the first time I went on Food Network. And I always wanted to be the next Rachel Ray, the next Giada De Laurentiis. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And then all of a sudden during COVID, like TikTok happened. And I'm like, oh my God, who are all these people? And they are like, now I'm like a dime a dozen. I'm like, where I thought the pool was so small of people who like had this personality and energy and passion for food. Now I'm like, there are so many people who may not even want to do it full time, but are just doing it as a side hustle and like amassing a giant following. And that for me, like for a little bit, I was like more like down about it. I'm like, oh, like, you know, how am I going to stand out from this crowd? Like, how am I going to forge my own path? But then I just kind of like refueled that into motivation. I'm like, well, this is the future. So you either hop on the bus or get left behind. And that's really so important now. It's like, even now when people ask me like, what are my goals? What are my, you know, aspirations? The answer is it's a little bit of this unknown territory, because where I typically would say, you know, my dream is to be the next Rachel Ray. How many people are watching talk show day TV at 2 p.m. on cable network? Not many people. Everybody's consuming media from their phone, from Netflix, from streaming. So I think that there's so much changing, especially now we're at the cusp of like AI exploding. Like, who knows what that's going to bring? Like, I just think like being on top of those trends and like being really able to like bend your knees and adapt is so important. I mean, there's part of me that still gets a little bit nostalgic and upset because like you, Justin, I'm like a diehard Food Network, like OGer, and like loved watching Cupcake Wars and Good Eats and 30-Minute Meals and all of those shows. And it's kind of sad to see that kind of like fizzle a little bit away and it become this like, okay, people only have a 1 minute attention span. I'm like, how are you getting information in a minute? But, you know, I think there's fun ways to play with it. And I mean, we'll see what the future brings and what that holds. But I think it's also an exciting point. You know, you like we were saying earlier, you can see positives, you can see negatives. If you look at the positives, I think that never before have you been able to, from your own home, from wherever you are in the world, be able to fully launch a community that now has other people joining in, and you can monetize and make a business around your personality, your brand, your opinions, your thoughts, your skills from anywhere, as opposed to like having to find an agent and pitch it to a network and get it picked up and spend thousands of dollars to just get it up and running when you can just literally do it from your iPhone for free, which is like crazy, but it's also exciting, and there's a lot of opportunity in that.
You literally mentioned the words that was in my next question, which was that like, Alessandra, what are your goals? And I think that is like just a twisted version of the like adults asking little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of question. And I think they want the like, I want to be a firefighter. And it's like, oh, cool, I can put you in a box now. And it's like, and for a lot of us, like I grew up with a pretty overbearing dad who was like, I want you to be this, and with like light expectations. And I think part of that can be helpful, right? Because it can at least give you some sense of security and direction. But I think the other side of that coin is like, it implies that there's like an end, quote unquote. And I think we are in this era where nobody is having a 25-year career in the same job, working for the same company, whatever. Like my father-in-law, I think, just cracked 35 years at the same company that he works for. That's incredible. Our generation, not really a thing. And so that's why I called this show the Repertoire Podcast, because I think of careers now, modern careers, as like, you pick this up here. And then I've seen TikToks of you like, oh, I did this private chef thing. And then like, oh, I did this event. And then, oh, I did this hosting thing. And oh, I am going to write a cookbook and learn a little bit about that. And so how are you thinking about like repertoire development? Are there some like favorite parts of your repertoire that's like, regardless of where I am, I know that I can use this here? And then I guess, what do you think is still missing from your repertoire?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think that for me, if I like you said, I mean, there's so much uncertainty of like where I want to go and what to do, that I think that when I see my like future vision, I think like the best way to kind of like put a title on what I want to be when I grow up, or like what I want my career goals is, I really would love to be like an authority in the food media industry, have people like hear my name and like kind of be like, okay, she knows what she's talking about, or, be that like personality, that name, and do all different things. I think as far
To be
as
clear, I don't want that answer because I don't think it exists.
yeah.
So like 5 years ago, if you asked me like, what are you going to be doing in 5 years, or even like, what's your plan? It does not map to what I'm doing right now. And so I don't think that's the right way to approach it. And so just to be clear, I don't expect that answer from you, but keep going.
No, that's true. I mean, listen, I think there's no way to actually, you're right. I mean, you could pick a field. So like, I know that I want to be in food,
Yes.
food media, whatever. Like that's kind of like my lane, my wide lane. But honestly, I like to hop around and do different things. I think, like you said, you want to keep on growing and striving. And when you think you've made it, like that's kind of when you start to plateau. And so I just want to keep on, taking on new exciting projects without any limits, without anything holding me back. I want to keep on taking on different experiences. From me, things that I want to add to my repertoire that I haven't done yet is really like spend more time really thinking about food overseas, and like, how that there are differences in that, because to me that's always been something I've really been passionate about. My family has always valued travel, and we always found that food is the best way to learn about a culture and like their history. But I think being able to go in and like not just do it like superficially, like going to eat in a new restaurant, but like having conversations with people, digging into that deeper, is like really getting my hands in it, like making things from another country. That's one of my goals and dreams, and like something that I want to continue exploring. I'd love to spend more time in fine dining kitchens. I think to me it's just something I'm super fascinated by. I know I don't see a long-term career for myself there. I just know that for me that's not where I would thrive, but I'm still so fascinated by it and would so deeply want to put my head down and yes chef, we chef, like for a week or two or a month, and just like really experience that, because I think there's so much in that. And yeah, I mean, and that's just like scratching the surface, because who knows what's to come. I mean, what is AI cooking gonna look like? That's what I'm thinking about from now. I'm trying to get ahead of the cusp, but I don't know. So I'm just a really curious person too, so I just want to continue to be curious in this space and see no bounds and limits into what is possible.
Do you keep notes anywhere? Do you document any of this stuff? I certainly have this video series that I do on YouTube where I document meals and then I do a voiceover for them and post it on YouTube. And I like that because making the content almost allows me to like revisit it, and then it's kind of like cemented there forever. Do you see making the content as like the thing that just kind of like calcifies that knowledge for you? And while you're in this like flurry of information, are you keeping track of information in any way, or are you just like the good stuff is going to stick?
I do. I'm like chaotic about it. I have like random notes apps, like note pages on my phone that I like jot down like one word thing or like ideas that I have. I have like literally next to me, like my thing is on a notebook. I have another notebook. I have another notebook here. Like I have a bunch of ideas. I have like documents on my thing. I put a lot out there, but I think as to what you were saying, which I think just really quickly touching on it, but like also for me, like putting all of my culinary school lessons in videos, like I've always seen social media, especially like apps like Instagram and stuff like that, is almost kind of like a time capsule of like what I was doing in that exact moment in time, what I was thinking about. And so to me, sometimes, like we were saying, just getting it out there is so special for me, because I look back, and even when on my regular Instagram, if I'm like talking to someone about, oh, when I was in Spain, I did this, I like will scroll through my Instagram instead of just going on my camera roll to like find it and like just remember that period of my life. To me, it like transports me, and I agree. I think it's super like special to me, and I like doing that.
All right, let's do some rapid fire ones so we can get you out of here. So it's a Saturday morning, your first day off after your work week, and you kind of stumble into the kitchen to make eggs for yourself. How do you make those eggs?
Soft scrambled.
And is that any cheese, crazy butter, chives at the end? Finishing touches?
We're starting with butter. We're soft scrambling them. We're adding a little bit of chives and freshly grated Parmigiano cheese. And then it's going over a nice piece of sourdough that's toasted and crispy. And then a little bit of a hot honey drizzle.
I love it. Is there something that in recent memory you've changed your mind on? Maybe something that you thought to be true, but after seeing something else, you're like, I don't know if that's true.
I mean, I don't know if this exactly fits the category, but like I have like been much more like experimenting with like ingredients that I had never worked before. So like I just worked with like soft shell crab the other day, and I guess I was like slightly intimidated by it before. Like I feel like you think it's gonna be so hard, and then I made it and I was like, this is like making a chicken cutlet, but
Right.
it looks a little different to start with. So I think like maybe just like trying and experimenting with like unique ingredients or things you haven't worked before. I think sometimes you think they're going to be like so complex and hard to do, but in reality, if you just take it step by step, it's not too bad.
I normally ask this question in the context of books, and you can certainly answer this, but I thought I'd tailor this question for you specifically. The normal question is there a book that's been most impactful in your career? But for you, I'm curious, is there a day or a lesson in culinary school that was super impactful for you? That was, you're like, man, that really pushed me, or I really still use that a lot?
I'm trying to think of like one singular like day of school or book.
Go ahead.
So you're gonna hate me, but I can't pick one specific thing. But for me, when I think about like when we did meat fabrication, for me that was super special and cool and was a transition period for me, because I think in my head as being a home chef, I was always intimidated by working with full proteins, whether it's meat or fish, and just like being able to like take a huge hunk of meat and cut it into like that perfect filet mignon medallion or that perfect pork chop, or fabricating a fish like from an entire fish to getting these two beautiful like fillets, that to me was like, wow. I'm like, okay, like I feel so much more confident as a chef right now, as a cook, as someone who can really take proteins and like make them into a dish. And I think for me, like that just was like the next level of my like culinary journey. It went from like, okay, you're doing this as a passion, to like, okay, this is a little bit more of like serious, this is professional, like this is super cool. So to me, like that was an aha moment. And then kind of a parallel, but when we did plating, our first few days of like, you know, high level plating, that was another like aha moment for me, because I've always been a creative and I love the art behind it. And so taking those tweezers and, you know, the spoon and making a beautiful stripe and, you know, playing with the way the colors dance on there and taking time to really think it through and draw it out first, like to me that was so cool, because that was the next level of my culinary journey and my culinary path. And coming from like basic recipes or maybe more complex recipes, but very for a home chef, to now it's doing it in a professional setting, taking it to the next level, adding new skills.
You somehow get a call right after this call ends, and you've just won an all expenses paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. And when you get there, there's someone you've always wanted to speak with waiting to have dinner with you. What is that restaurant, and who is that person?
I'm going to Noma and I'm meeting Massimo Bottura.
What would you ask him?
I just would love to pick his brain about like, because I feel like pick his brain. I feel like he's already shared so much of his picked brain on like interviews and things, but just be able to like talk to him and through the lens of like my journey and like what I've done and like what his advice would be, and like just hearing it firsthand, like his culinary philosophy. He's just like such an amazing creative that it would be so cool to like pick apart a little bit like the way he thinks. And of course eating over a meal such as like Noma or like any of those other like crazy restaurants, I think it would just be really cool to see how he responds to getting these sorts of dishes and stuff like that.
Is there a season of Noma? Because they have the seafood season, the vegetable season, and the game season. Is there one season that you would gravitate towards?
I'm like a protein person, so definitely either the fish or the game season. Maybe the game season.
Got it.
I feel like that would just be crazy, because I know they'd come out with insane elements.
There's this segment of The Bear where the lead character, Carmen, really likes denim. And it's kind of this funny thing where, like, he doesn't really share a lot about denim, but he, like, knows a shit ton about it and collects it and does all that stuff. Is there anything like that for you where it's, like, you don't really share it that much, but if, like, people really sat down and asked you or, like, went through your house, they would say, like, Alessandra really likes this?
I don't know if it's something tangible, but, like, something about me that, like, I feel like people don't know from, like, obviously all the culinary stuff is that I danced professionally for 15 years.
Wow.
And I was like such a musical theater person. And so I love like singing, dancing, movies, acting. It's like so funny. I went to go see The Little Mermaid last weekend, and I can't stop singing Part of Your World, like literally belting to the point where I'm losing my voice in the shower. So I feel like that's something that like I have a bubbly personality. I don't think it's like too out there to think about, but I am definitely like love like performing arts as well.
All right, last question for you. What do you think chefs can be doing better to help the next generation?
I think, and we were talking, like, full circle from where we started this podcast, I think that, like, just being open to sharing their knowledge and not gatekeeping information, I think that's the most important thing. And I would also say, like, on that same kind of note, like, being kind. I think that like so many times you see chefs being like super stern and like super like hard on people, which yes, absolutely, it's important to like kind of like make sure people know their place and like put the time in and put their hard work in. But I strongly am a firm believer that like in order to really, motivate and impact somebody, you also need to boost them up a little bit. So I think just like really being open to helping people and also like giving them, motivation and like positive reinforcement as much as they do negative is something that I think would be such a positive driving force in the future for chefs and mentees.
I'm so excited to have all of your stuff linked down in the show notes for folks that want to get in touch with you, send you a DM, ask a question, just keep up with what all the craziness that your life is right now. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and share so much of your story. And yeah, if you have any parting thoughts for the audience, I'd love for you to share stuff, but just thank you for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, thank you. I mean, I am someone who loves to share her journey in the hopes of inspiring other people or just like helping them along their own journey. So any chance I get to kind of share my voice, share my perspective, and hopefully inspire or touch or motivate someone to go out and do something in their own life, there's nothing more that I could ask for. And my final parting word would just be to anyone listening out there, just know that like you have the confidence in you. You just need to find it, harness it, and like run with it. And don't let anybody tear you down. And even if you get down for a little bit, like you're always going to be resilient and bounce right back up. And also, if you ever have any questions or if there's anything that I can ever, help you with, feel free to reach out on me via my social platforms, email, DMs. I am really good about trying to get through all those messages and really help anyone that I can.
Well, here we are together again at the end of another episode of the Repertoire Podcast. If this is your first time listening, this is a show for hospitality creators who want to think better, increase their performance, and believe that it's possible to take lessons from what others have already learned. I am your host, Justin Kana, and if you're new here, I'd like to personally welcome you to the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Friendly heads up to check out the show notes inside of the description of this podcast if you want to check out previous guests, links to specifics that got brought up in this episode, as well as other helpful content that we create and share here online, because everything we do is focused on helping you along your journey. If you don't have a ton of time, the best place to start is with some value sent straight to your inbox every single week. It's called the Repertoire Newsletter, where we share knowledge on sharpening your skills, asymmetric upside, and exploring the industry beyond the status quo. If you subscribe, we'll keep you up to date on trends that are shaping the hospitality creator ecosystem. We'll share discounts on gear that we find, as well as content that we've been producing ourselves and helpful articles that we've already read and decided are worth your time. Last up, if you want to connect with other industry professionals in the Repertoire Pro community, you want to check out courses like Total Station Domination or download free tools that we've created, you can learn more at joinrepertoire.com. That's joinrepertoire.com. The only ask from me is that if you enjoyed this episode, I'd really appreciate a review of this show on Apple Podcasts as well as Spotify to help the podcast universe know that people like us like shows like this. Regardless, I'll see you in the next episode. My name is Justin Kana, and I hope you have a good one.